Well, hi everybody again. Welcome to Coffee with Craig, with myself, Craig Hamilton Parker. And if you've not been to this channel before, I'm a psychic medium and I give my thoughts, my insights, my views, my ideas about what's happening in the world, and sometimes make some predictions as well. And it's a whole mixture of those things. And I love your comments and so forth. And you're going to join me today to talk about the topic today is about Donald Trump. Is he a global leader in the making? I mean, what level will Donald Trump go to as he wields power across the world? And some of the thoughts that I have has been given to me in my meditations and so forth about what happens in the world at the moment. Because we have today, I sense a feeling that the mood of that's my coffee. Well, actually, it's Tulsi tea. I like Tulsi tea quite a bit. It doesn't sound quite the same Tulsi tea with Craig. Yeah, the mood of the world is changing, isn't it? The mood of the world at the moment around the world is changing. I mean, we've now got Trump as leader of the free world, but his influence, I feel his influence will shake the foundations of just about everything, whether it comes to politics, whether it comes to economics, but also more importantly, the cultural change this is going to make, not just in America, but around the world. I mean, we are living in momentous times. And me too. I mean, I feel sometimes I get a little bit of a feeling of these things, maybe more so than some of the pundits, actually, because I do readings for people, psychic readings for people all over the world, in the UK, in China, and the Arab countries, even all sorts of people. And they all talk to me about their fears, their worries, and sometimes ask me to make predictions in their private reading about things that are happening in their own countries too. So I think I get a pretty good insight, actually, into what's happening in the hearts of most people and the concerns they have in their countries, which gives me an interesting perspective. You could say I've got my finger on the pulse of the zeitgeist, unlike perhaps the agenda-driven media people. So today, I'm going to ask about how far will Trump's power extend, and what influence will him and his billionaire team, as it were, what influence will they have on the path ahead? And will it be for good or will it be for bad? So, welcome to Coffee with Craig. Well, hi again. So if you're here for the first time, don't forget to follow the channel. And as I remind everybody, please always give me a thumbs up if you can, because it does help the algorithm. It doesn't take much to do that, but it helps me to keep my channel up there on the algorithm. And in today's day where, you know, channels like this can easily get knocked back by Russian bots and Chinese bots and people that have an agendas against the type of thing I talk about, it's important that the algorithm can see that people do actually like what I have to say. And of course, you can say if you don't like it as well, that's fine. But anyway, hopefully you'll like some of my thoughts and some of my insights today, since we've watched the inauguration of Donald Trump to become the president of America. And it was, wow, it was brilliant viewing. I mean, there's nothing on telly like it. I thought I sat and watched a large part of it. And there must be some people going, wow, and others going, quaking in their boots at what he says. And you've got to admit, it's quite interesting entertainment as much as anything. I know this is the fate of the world in our hand, in his hands at the moment, but it's so interesting to see. And I think a lot of people wish in their countries, and I'm sure it's the case here in the UK, that there's a lot of people are kind of envious about the fact that the USA now does have a strong leader. They're envious of the fact that Trump, despite whether you like him or you don't, you've got to give it to him that he's a man that you can't put a good man down, as it were, or you can't put a bad man down as well, some of you might say. But because I know there's still split, and I know we get people from, you know, on both sides of the camp that watch this this channel, and I think that's great, because we do need to have debate, and I think that's been one of the things that's been missing so much, that's been damaging our cultures around the world, council culture. But maybe that's going to be swept aside, and we can start having proper debates about these things. But judging by people I know, and judging by comments that come on this site, and judging by what you see out there, I think a lot of people are kind of pleased that Trump's in power now. And judging by the media, though, everybody hates him. The media say the opposite. But if you listen to people, like I say, when I do readings for people, and you know, I chat a lot with the patrons on this channel. You can join in the description below. But the patrons put some great ideas forward sometimes. And I think that, you know, I just get, you know, when I say finger on the pulse of the zeitgeist, I feel there's a groundswell of change of people, and particularly we're seeing it here in the UK. There's a reflection of this in the voting intentions of people here in the UK, and it suggests very much that the media are very wrong in their take of things. Now, I know not many of us nowadays trust the media very much, because the way they kind of have their own agendas. For example, actually, in the press at the moment here in the UK, and people in America might not know of this story, but we had some dreadful knifings in Southport that was done, but the media covered it and said that this was a young boy that had done this to these young girls who were going to a Taylor Swift themed party, and knifed a kid's party by what they called a young, well, he was only a young kid who didn't know what he was doing, a Welsh choir boy, you know. And now the actual pictures come out of him, and he looks like an absolute nutter, and far from a choir boy, far from a young lad. You know, it's just one more example, isn't it? It's just one more example of the way the media kind of twist the agenda. In that case, they don't want people out on the streets protesting, because people were actually going out and really causing a lot of fuss about this, protesting and angry about what this represented, because this represented, you know, people from foreigners, basically, that were people didn't like, that they were that were causing trouble in this country, and people were being told, no, he's just a Welsh choir boy. Oh, far from it, really, isn't it? So we've been getting this, and really, Trump is one of those that's really exposed this idea of fake news. Before Trump came along, we didn't get fake news, didn't get the word out there, fake news. It's got to go in the Oxford Dictionary as one of the most used phrases these last few years. It must be. But the problem is we don't know what to trust. Unfortunately, we can get other sources, we can get other opinions that are not sanitized by the mainstream media, and also by Facebook, which has become a bit like a mainstream media too. And we're starting to get more freedom of thought, and so important in a world that has become polarized. Because just as we've been getting many troubles in America, so we're getting those similar sort of questions are being raised here in the UK, and very much throughout the Western world, in Europe as well. People are asking the same questions, the same problems. And there are many politicians out there, and journalists, I feel, and those who've been feathering their nests for a long time, who are terrified of Trump coming into power. When you hear his talk, I think, my God, you know, what would Nancy Pelosi be doing at this moment, listening to that, and all those others that have got such a strong anti-Trump agenda. And here in the UK, we've got our own problems. We've got our beloved Keir Starmer here, who's our prime minister, who is perhaps one of the most wooden, weak, and one of the worst prime ministers we've ever had. And that's not just me saying that. That's a huge proportion of the population here in the UK who are looking at this and say, what have we been had given to us as a prime minister? Similarly, for those with Justin Trudeau and a huge number of the EU leaders as well. You don't get what you vote for, it seems. And this isn't voting corruption. This is just the way the system works and the way the voices are not being heard. So there's being a sea change at the moment with all these things. And I think particularly with Keir Starmer, for example, just continuing on that route a bit more, I said he's going to be exposed for something, didn't I? I felt there was perhaps a corruption thing or some weird thing in the background that he's going to be exposed for. And here we are now seeing him being brought to book over these where was it? Southport, was it? Southport bloody things. So we're going to see major changes here in the UK. And why I'm saying this partly is because what's happening here in the UK is in many ways a reverberation of what's already started in America. And Trump is an extraordinary leader, like him or not. He's an extraordinary person. We've never had anything quite like it. We've never had anybody as a world leader that's prepared to go up there and shake the very foundations of everything, from NATO to the World Health Organization, to the way we look at energy, to the way we look at migration, to the way we look at culture. Every single aspect of what has been taken as given is now being challenged. And I think this is absolutely important. We may go back to the same values again, but it all needs to be questioned, because we've been spoon-fed all this nonsense from the mainstream media mainly, and this decision that everybody has that globalization is a good thing and good for everybody. But is it really? Are these things any good for the world? Because one of the things that's going to be shaken up worldwide, and this is why I'm seeing Trump not as just a leader of America, but also the first, perhaps, of a true world leader, for good or bad. And, you know, we could have similar leaders that could turn the world into a very dodgy place if we allow such power into one man's hands. But how many people in the world would have the power to, how many politicians are there who have the power to say, if you don't sort out Gaza before I get into power, woe betide you? And everybody scrambles to change things, and people are scrambling around the world to change things in case Trump comes to power. What a wield of power that is. Has there ever been in the history of the world a person with such power? And power is always a dangerous thing as well. We have to question these things as well as see them for good or for bad. Where does it lead? And I think many of the things, I mean, when I watched all the inauguration, and I don't know what you guys thought, but please put comments about this. I mean, one of the phrases that jumped out for me was the importance of the return to common sense, because I think we've had such a lot of, well, I mean, we've got to call it out as nonsense, really. This idea of the diversity and these more than one sex and all the rest of it, and all those sort of over inclusive things, you know, over representation of those inclusivities, and that return to the idea that we should judge people on their merit, and that merit is often questioned. I mean, you know, the merit of a psychic. I mean, you judge a psychic on the fruits that they deliver, you know, get it right, get it wrong. Okay, that's how you have to judge a person. And the media and the rest of it change all that. They say, oh no, we've got to have, these are the values you've got to have, you know, and these are the politicians you've got to have. You've got to have more female politicians. Look what we get here in the UK with Reeves in power. Was she really a person of merit, or was she put in place just because she was a woman? I mean, it doesn't matter whether a person, what race a person is, what sex a person is, or any of it. Can they do the job? That's all that matters. And I think most people have always thought that for years and years. This isn't something new. And this whole movement that sort of sprang out of the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter movement and everything like that, mainly from California, really is like a mind virus of some sort that's completely made the world ill. So when I watched all this, I thought this is one of the world things that will make Trump a kind of a world force, because this is going to influence everywhere. You know, I mean, particularly the UK and the USA, I always feel that when those two could work together, we had pretty good things in the world in the past. I mean, out of Britain came the Industrial Revolution, and everybody says we should be ashamed of that, and we should be ashamed of the empire that Britain built and so forth. But Britain brought democracy to the world, and Britain built most of the values that America have taken up came from Britain. Mainly, it was British democracy. I know they have their own systems and everything like that, but it was the industrialization that Britain started, Europe followed with, and America put onto steroids. Without all that, where would the world be? We'd all be in the Stone Age times. So I think when we get rid of this idea of the things that hold us back, and I think there's going to be a greater move because of what's happening in America to perhaps a resistance to the idea of globalization. I mean, and also a resistance to countries like the UK and America and Europe as well, a resistance to allowing the third world to occupy us. I mean, we don't want mass migration. Ask any Anglo-Saxon person, for example, and I don't mean to, people that are sort of the tribes of Britain and so forth. We don't mind people coming into our country, but we don't want to be overwhelmed. We've always welcomed other people into the country and other races and other cultures. We welcomed them and developed them and turned them into something that made us even more special because of it. But the scale of it has been completely out of hand. It's become like an occupation. These things are going to influence the world. These things are going to be, we're going to be fighting, as each country is going to be fighting to regain its identity, to regain its pride in our countries. And that's not just Britain, not just America, but you look at the countries in Europe, particularly, that have been overwhelmed by this, by France and Germany and Sweden and Holland and Netherlands, rather, and all the rest of it, all overwhelmed by floods of people coming into our countries that has disrupted and destroyed our cultures. Our cultures have been at threat. And so I think that Trump saying, look, it's merit, and we shouldn't let loads and loads of people in, it's got to go that way. And this is going to be so much more as a world movement for this. I also think just how deep some of this goes, actually, too, because today again in the news is Prince Harry has won his case in court against the media, or more or less. They've more or less given in and said, look, okay, we're going to do a deal with you. We're going to put our hands up and say, yes, we did tap phones and the rest of it. Then I listen on LBC radio, for example. I don't know if you in America, you guys won't hear it, but it's quite a good program for questions and answers and people ringing in. But it's real lefty, in my opinion, and real liberal-ish type of pushing those same agendas like the BBC does. But I heard the commentator say things like, everyone was against Harry and Meghan because Harry married a black person. And I listen to that and think, what a lot of madness. Britain is a tolerant country. People weren't worried about that. We all celebrated the idea, including the royal family. We've celebrated the idea that there could be, black people in the royal family, although Meghan's honey-toned, if you ask me, if we're honest about this. But, they turn it into a big racial thing. And it's not. We don't like Harry and Meghan in this country because basically Harry turned into a traitor and undermined everything and all the values. Together, they were whinging and trying to ruin the reputation of the royal family. And remembering that, you know, the royal family is really the big PR unit of the UK, frankly. That was so. I think, God, they have to turn everything into that. And this is where I think we're going to get some really big cultural shifts. And people are going to say, hey, just a minute. This isn't all about race. This is about, like Trump said, merit. You know, remember when the predictions I was making about Trump coming into power, I said Trump would get the black vote in America. And he did, particularly the black male vote, because they don't like some weakling sort of Biden sort of character stumbling across the stage. They want a strong person. And it's the same around the world. You know, we want merit. We want people in power who have merit. We want people in jobs who have merit, not all this this way it all has to be manipulated. And a meritocracy is a very, very, very important thing. And this is, I think, one of the big, big things that's going to start having an influence on all countries. You know, what do you think? Are you, in your country, do you feel that it should be a meritocracy now and that people should be selected on merit? Are they kind of all the time shifting this cultural mood in the wrong way? Because I feel there's a shift in the cultural mood of the world at the moment, not just individual countries. And the mood changes because people like to be on the side of the winners, don't they? You know, if you think about it, and when you talk to anybody about England or something, or no, you're not allowed to say England, Great Britain, not allowed to say that either. The United Kingdom, okay, possibly. When you talk about it to people when you go to India or go somewhere else, and they say, oh yes, David Beckham, or they go on about Manchester United, you know, because people want to be on the side of the winners. They don't talk about, you know, Hamilton Academicals or whatever it is, you know, all the other small teams, you know. They talk about they want to be on the side of the winners. And what we have here is now everybody wants to be on the side of the winners, because I've noticed slight changes in the way the media speak, you know. I've been hearing the way the terminology starting to change. Are you starting to notice that at all? I mean, we're not allowed to have Anglo-Saxon values, it seems. You know, we can talk about everybody, but not the Anglo-Saxons. So I think there's going to be a new union of countries, actually, between what I say were the original Anglo-Saxons. Because you think about it, you look at back at my videos, I said that I saw America, I saw Canada, I saw the UK, I saw Australia and South Africa all coming together to form a sort of a trading bloc in the future. And they would have similar political affiliations, and it would be something very similar to what has happened in Europe, possibly with the free movement of people, or a greater movement of people between those countries. And this was kind of like a union of English-speaking peoples in many ways. And I said eventually that India too would join it, because India was also basically got an English-speaking peoples as well. In many respects, it's the second language in India. And I saw this all coming together as one block. And now we've got almost that starting to happen. Are the seeds of it here? It would have been unthinkable for somebody to say, let Canada become a state of America. Now, that's an extreme. That's not going to be like a state of America. But could Canada, instead of having walls built up, become part of a new sort of block of some sort that could even include the UK, could even include Australia, and could include other countries and India, because I'll talk about India in a minute too, because I think there's going to be some very interesting things with India with this. This is where, you know, Europe became kind of one conglomerate, but it was run by a committee almost. It doesn't have leadership. What if we had something like that, but with a strong leader? I mean, it could be a very dangerous force as well as a very good force, but it could go either way with this. But I saw that some time ago, and I feel it's going to be something important. And I think we're going to get that. What do you think? Does that sound right to you? Or does that sound like the British Empire all over again? You know, because what's going to happen in the world in the future too is that India is going to rise. China as I've said, I feel China will eventually break up, and Chinese communism will eventually go. But I see India rising in power, but rising particularly in cultural influence. I'm very, very interested by the fact, actually, because I think I'm very interested by the fact there's a lot of strong Hindu influence already in, well, Indian and Hindu influence, I suppose you could say, in Trump's team in many ways. And Trump really got on with Modi in the past. And something big's going to happen with India and America as well. Already I see countries of the world coming together, partly to challenge China, also possibly to challenge Russia, but also to challenge Europe up to a point. And I see you think about the names that are in his team. We've got Tulsi Gabbard. I like my Tulsi tea, just excuse me. Ursha Vance, for example, Vivek Ramaswamy, Kash Patel. What was his name? The other, Harmeet Dillon. I've got the name wrong there, I think. And Sri Ram Krishnam, isn't it? I'm not quite right with my names. I don't watch it all the time, but these are the ones that I remember from Hindu names that seem to be popping up. I mean, they love Trump in India, you know. I know there's been surveys that say different, but you talk to the people in India, and a lot of Indians really do like Trump. They love him in Saudi Arabia too. And I feel that he's making a cultural shift around the world. You know, I think he will sort out the problems of the Middle East. So I'll talk about that in a minute too. But he has become an international cultural figure. He's become an international, almost, you know, it sounds odd, but he's become almost a spiritual figure. And if you follow the channel, do you remember the Naadis when I was talking about Trump's Naadi, which I wrote about in my book, Be Happy as well? I published some of it in there, but it said after his presidency, but that was, I was writing that at the time of his other presidency, but it's happening now. It said after his presidency, he would become a spiritual leader for the world. Very odd that the Naadi should say that. And it said the world would be astonished by this and shocked by it. And are we not already a little bit shocked when we hear Trump talk about his religious feelings? That assassination attempt that I predicted, didn't I? And I said he'd be wounded, and he caught his ear. I mean, camera went a bit there, to come that close to death by turning your head to that close to death. How would you feel if it happened to you? Wouldn't it make you rethink? It did here with Nigel Farage when he had the plane crash and nearly died. You know, those last minutes, those minutes before you think is going to be your death, your sense of purpose and what I want to do in this world and what haven't I've completed must come right up in your face. I had a car accident once, and it comes right up in your face. I've not finished yet. There's more to do. You know, it's like fearless feeling when you come to those. If you've had have you had a near death like experience like that, or a closeness to death like that ever? What comes up in your mind? You know, you come up with you really think your purpose in life. You think, oh God, all that don't matter, all that don't matter, but this really does. Trump's had that, and so have some of the other leaders that I think are joining him here. And we're going to see a very strong, him come as quite a strong kind of spiritual figure in a way. And that is quite odd in some respects, isn't it? But that's what the Naadi said, and that's why I'm so interested that there seems to be Indians in his team, and there was so much said in the Naadi that he'd been a Shiva priest in India in the past. It seems bonkers, doesn't it? But look at the Indians around him, and I think there's going to be a lot happening with India and Trump. Now, there's so much. I mean, I haven't touched Russia and all the rest of the things at the moment yet either, because I can't do it all. But in this one of the other thoughts I feel is important to bring forward is what's going to happen soon around us too. I've been saying about Taiwan for a while. I feel there's going to be some issues of that very much ahead soon, coming up quite soon, because these challenges are going to come in while the changeover period is happening. But I still think China's kind of, at the moment, kind of holding its breath, not quite sure whether to act or not. And that's kind of the unknown of not knowing whether you're going to get a punch in the eye or not if you step out of line. But the Middle East, I think, is a different issue, because I'm interested in the fact that Trump spoke to Netanyahu before the election. I mentioned this earlier in another video recently, but I feel there's been a deal done in the background here, you know, and I think that deal went something like this. It was something like, sort those hostages out. I don't want to be dealing with hostages when I come into power. So you sort those hostages out, and I'm going to say it on the world stage, sort those hostages out or woe betide you. And he said that, and it's started to sort out now, and hopefully many of the hostages will be released. Sadly, I feel most of them are dead. I feel the large number are dead, and that's gonna rouse up the Israeli mindset, because, you know, we've been fighting over these hostages and there's hardly any left. Sadly, I know we're talking about people's lives here, but I mean, that's what I feel, that the hostage thing is being blown up like this. But once those things are settled, I feel the agenda, and I think Trump and Netanyahu must have spoken about this, about the proliferation of the nuclear warheads in Iran. And Israel has two choices now. You know, it's said, just because the hostages are being released doesn't mean that we're going to hold back we won't retaliate against things. They're almost wanting a retaliation now. Maybe a false flag retaliation might come up, because the important thing from their point of view is they've got two choices now. They can either let things all settle down and we can try again to use the techniques that they used before when Trump was in power, of putting sanctions onto Iran to stop it and to stop the nuclear warheads, or they can go in and finish the job. And I feel Netanyahu, Trump will be saying, look, we can put sanctions on, we can stop them now. I think Netanyahu's wants to complete his legacy too, and he's going to go in and want to finish the job, which means a strike on the Iranian nuclear facilities. And I feel that's going to happen, because once the strike's been hit, once you've done that last final blow, as it were, I think the Iranian people will rise up, and because they don't want that sort of nonsense, not the main people of Iran. I mean, again, when you do readings with people, you meet Iranian people, for example, who've had readings with me, and you think there's a completely different world to what we see on the news. They're just normal people like you and me. They're not all going around burning American flags. I feel that once that happens, I feel that, you know, I've said about it before, that there will be an uprising in Iran. That will happen. So and I think it will happen. My feeling is it will happen after a strike on the nuclear facilities. And then with that, the balance of power will then shift to Saudi Arabia. And Trump had a lot to do with, I think they called it Abrahamic Accord, wasn't it? It was called about saying that we have a cultural similarity. You know, I think Iran and Saudi Arabia is almost as poles apart as they are with the Israelis. They're different type of mindsets, different types of Islam, but they all have, including Israel, have the common denominator of being Abrahamic religions. They have Abraham as the heart of the religion, and I feel that is going to be reanimated again. It's very important, that culturally, because the way you win the hearts and minds of the world is through our cultures. It's our cultures that have been damaged and watered down, and some would say destroyed and upset. It's our cultures that bind a nation together, and it's our common denominators in our cultures that can bind cultures together. So I think a lot of good will come out of this eventually, and we may indeed even see peace in the Middle East eventually through these accords. And one last thing that's been struck me and has been quite important, I feel, is what's happening with the social media changes that we're seeing around. Now, here in the UK, we've got Keir Starmer ready to put every gag on free speech that you can think of. And I don't think that's the way forward. But I predicted in my other ones earlier in the year, and last year I predicted and said that TikTok would be bought by Elon Musk, didn't I? I said X, and X is already making moves about this. It would be quite an interesting combination to put TikTok together with X. And the interesting thing that Trump has said there, that America will take part of the company. It will take 50% of it. Do you know what that is called here in the UK? We call it nationalisation, or part nationalisation, partly state-owned. It seems like partly state-owned he's talking about. And to have social media as state-owned at all, we know what happens with the BBC when a state-owned organisation gets infiltrated and gets political parties in the background trying to sort of steer the nation, and it becomes almost a propaganda platform. Anyway, interesting that that's happening. I feel there's going to be a lot of coming together of the world through social media, and major changes in what's happening with social media, and there's going to be a very big world popular or popularist type of movement. Today we're frightened to be proud of our nations. Today people are looking to Trump and thinking, well, this makes me think, shouldn't we sort of be proud of our nations? Shouldn't we be proud of success? Shouldn't we, instead of be saying giving everybody a prize, only the winners should get a prize? Why do we have to water everything down? Why do we have to encourage the feminization of the boys at school? And why do we have to stop people being proud to be male, or proud to be female, or proud to be a good-looking woman, or proud to be a strong man, or whatever? You know, I mean, those are all things that have been with us for centuries. So people are beginning to relook at things, you know, and we want to make our own countries great again. Each country is saying the same thing. So when I'm talking about the theme of this, is kind of like Trump's power as a personality to change the world. I feel it's making the world rethink, and I think it's particularly making the Anglo-Saxon peoples rethink, you know, because nowadays to call yourself English is considered to be a racist thing. I follow a guy called Simon Webb on his channel on YouTube. It's History Debunked, he calls it. Brilliant, I think he is, in its simplicity of what he says. And he said today, we can say things like Palestine belongs to Palestinian people. We can say Ukraine for the Ukrainians. But the odd one out is English for the English, because immediately you say that, the first two are legitimate, but the third one is nationalism. And I think, well, that was an interesting point there. You know, we're all frightened to be proud of our nations or proud of our own heritage. And somehow being English is something bad. Being Anglo-Saxon is something bad. And I think other races accept that too, and know that this is a lot of nonsense, that it's what we've been having with this attempt to change society by using rules and regulations to make this racist and that racist. Going back to the original theme, those barriers have got to be broken down, and I think Trump is helping us to do that. It's merit that counts. It's merit that counts, and we should be proud of who we are, proud of our nations, proud of our histories. Of each nation should be proud of its history, because marvelous things have been done by all the countries of the world in different ways. So I think there's a sea change in attitude coming, and I feel this will be a real huge influence on the course of the world's history that we will see over the coming years. I mean, Trump is unique. And I feel he's the first, perhaps, historical figure that's really going to be the first truly considered as a global leader. I mean, others will follow in his example, particularly if what happens and countries start to come together, as I've suggested when I was talking about the union of Canada and Britain and the world coming, those countries of the world coming together. I mean, the USA has never wielded such power before. It's never wielded its power much before. But I feel in the times ahead, things are going to be very different and very interesting. And I feel with a lot of this, it's going to bring a lot of social unrest, sadly. There will be a great deal more in 2025 of social unrest and riots on the streets in many countries around the world, as traditional values and some of the nonsense that's plagued our cultures combat one another, and the world begins to try to sort itself out. And a lot of that's going to become because It's kind of people are looking at America and saying, we like what's going on there. Me too. So it's going to be an interesting period ahead. And again, thanks, guys, for joining this channel. Thanks for supporting it. Do give me a thumbs up, as I said. And if you like to debate these things a bit more, go and consider perhaps becoming a patron of the channel. Help support it. Help the channel keep going. Read my books, like I mentioned about, my book, Be Happy, there as we're talking. And do go and have a look at my website and see what else Jane and I have got to offer. But anyway, thank you so much for supporting the channel, guys. See you again. Bye for now.
If you look back at my earlier predictions, and in particular the predictions I made on the newspaper, The Sun's website, I did actually say on there, the actual words were, there will be a flu epidemic linked to bioterrorism.
And my thoughts are that Liz Truss will make it to the final, be the next PM. I think she will actually have a final battle between her and Rishi Sunak. We've not seen the full end of Boris Johnson either, I tell you. But Rishi Sunak actually will eventually, I feel, be the next leader of the Conservatives. So I think there's going to be a few conflicts that Britain's going to be drawn into, including I think Russia is going to take some moves against Ukraine.
I think she will make it past her platinum jubilee, which comes up this year. But I think after that, we'll see a sudden and quick deterioration in the Queen's health. And I think we might lose the Queen towards the end of 2022. There's going to be a huge backlash from over the Netflix programs and screening, because I feel it comes out at a bad time. Charles will come to become King Charles, but his reign, I feel, will be short.
I said that Prince Charles would be hit by an egg. And of course, there it is, all in the press today. Marvellous person she is. She does something extraordinary. That could even put her life a little bit at risk with the way she did this. Okay.
Is there something also there that's not been spoken about fully? Did they also discover something with Kate that wasn't quite right?
A huge swarm of people knocking the doors of Europe and America. And I feel that Ukraine conflict is going to be a kind of a grinding conflict that goes on and on. I also feel that there's something going to happen in the Middle East as well. I feel as if there's going to be a sudden and unexpected thing happen in the Middle East. So I feel they're going to take it into their own hands, and I feel we're going to get a strike from Israel. This is going to be one of the significant things in 2023.
I've said it before and I say it again. I feel Israel, with the help from the USA, will strike the Iranian nuclear facilities.
I said that there would be an earthquake that would shake New York.
At this time, I've been sensing that for a while that there's going to be a big earthquake of some sort. And this could well come up during April period.
I'm seeing a bridge collapsing, actually the whole infrastructure of it going.
I predict something very dark happens to President Joe Biden. He's being pulled from power, sacked, as it were, and quite close to the election time. But I kind of sense it's more to do with illness, perhaps, senility, and people stopping him because of that. So it could even be that a new candidate will run for the presidential nominee. I predict that Trump will win the November 2024 election.
And I feel very strongly that the black vote is going to move towards Trump. See him as a sort of a bit of a cool guy. I can't see Trump being put in jail despite what they're throwing at him. I can't see a jail sentence with him. But I get the feeling one of the candidates has an attempt on the candidate's life. Could there have been a plan to assassinate either him or Trump, perhaps? There's going to be an assassination attempt on Trump, I think. And that will fail. But he might maybe get wounded or something like that.